Today in Bachelor Nation, September 8, 2025, fans were shocked as news broke that Andrew Firestone, one of the earliest bachelors from Season 3, had separated from his wife Ivana Basilovic after 17 years of marriage, and while the announcement itself was short, respectful, and carefully worded, the cultural ripple effect was enormous, with tabloids, mainstream outlets, podcasts, and social media voices dissecting not only what this meant for Andrew and Ivana as individuals but also what it symbolized for Bachelor Nation as a whole, since Firestone had long been held up as an emblem of post-show success, a man who represented the possibility that reality TV could lead to genuine and lasting love even if not directly through the rose-filled fairytale endings producers once promised, and as news cycles churned with retrospectives on his season, his proposal to Jen Sheft, and their amicable split, the attention inevitably shifted to his eventual meeting with Ivana, the story of how they built a life outside the cameras, raised 3 children, and seemingly avoided the chaos and collapse that so often define celebrity unions. But now, with the acknowledgement of their separation, commentators leaned into questions about longevity, the wear and tear of marriage, the reality of high-profile lives intersecting with ordinary struggles, and how fans often confuse the curated public image of stability with the hidden, complex truths of private relationships. And as people scrolled endlessly through Twitter threads, Reddit forums, TikTok reactions, and Instagram stories, they encountered not just expressions of sympathy but also heated debates about whether reality TV couples are unfairly burdened with the expectation of permanence, whether audiences project too much onto these pairings, and whether, in a culture that consumes love stories as content, we are setting everyone up for inevitable disappointment. And Firestone's own statement, delivered with dignity, made clear that he and Ivana would continue to prioritize their children and maintain mutual respect. But even such gracious language could not stop speculation, with some gossip outlets digging for alleged reasons behind the split, whispering about career pressures, lifestyle differences, and the possibility that after nearly 2 decades, their lives had simply evolved in directions that no longer aligned. Yet beyond sensationalism, there were genuine conversations about the way long marriages shift, about how even strong bonds face strains from the everyday balancing act of work, parenting, aging, and personal growth, and for many viewers who had followed Andrew's journey since his television debut in 2003, the news stirred nostalgia, reminding them of the era when The Bachelor was still a fresh, somewhat naive concept in reality television, when audiences tuned in weekly to see if roses and helicopter dates could truly foster love, and when Andrew himself, heir to the Firestone tire fortune and cast as a charming, affluent bachelor next door, embodied the fantasy of finding a partner in a whirlwind televised romance, though of course that fantasy unraveled when his engagement to Jen ended, a breakup that was handled with relative grace but that also fed into the show's growing reputation as a machine that manufactured fleeting romance rather than lasting partnership. And yet, when Andrew found love years later with Ivana, it felt to many like a vindication, a narrative corrective, proof that even if the show failed in its immediate mission, the process of opening oneself up to love in such a public way could eventually lead to the real thing, which is why the unraveling of his marriage now, after 17 years, feels both shocking and strangely ordinary, for in truth, marriages end every day, divorce is part of social reality, and the fact that Andrew and Ivana lasted nearly 2 decades already placed them above average in terms of longevity. But in the world of Bachelor Nation, where symbolism is everything, the dissolution became a storyline bigger than the 2 individuals, and fans projected onto it anxieties about love, about time, about whether the romances they invest in are doomed, about whether hope is foolish or essential. And as the discourse spiraled, Bachelor alums weighed in too, with former leads, contestants, and franchise insiders posting supportive notes, calling for privacy, and sharing how much they admired the way Andrew and Ivana had handled themselves over the years, while others used the moment to reflect on their own journeys, some happily married, some divorced, some still searching, each story weaving into the larger tapestry of a franchise that has always blurred the lines between entertainment and real emotional stakes. And cultural critics took the opportunity to analyze why fans feel so deeply connected to these narratives, suggesting that in a fragmented media landscape, Bachelor Nation has long provided a communal mythos, a modern-day serialized fairy tale where people gather around not just for drama but for the hope of witnessing authentic connection. And when one of the community's longest-running happy endings shifts into something else, it destabilizes that myth, reminding audiences that love, like life, is unpredictable, resistant to tidy conclusions, and yet still worth pursuing, still worth celebrating. And in this paradox lies the power of the franchise, that even in the face of divorces, breakups, and scandals, people continue to believe in the possibility of lasting love, perhaps because it is the very fragility of these unions that makes them feel human and relatable. And so today, as headlines blared and think pieces multiplied, the story of Andrew Firestone and Ivana Basilovic was no longer just about them, it was about us, about the way we consume stories of love and loss, about the hope we pin onto strangers, about the reflection of our own desires and fears in the narratives of others. And as the sun set on September 8, 2025, the shock began to soften into contemplation, with fans remembering that though the chapter had changed, the story was not over. For Andrew and Ivana's journey as co-parents, as individuals still shaping their lives, continues, and Bachelor Nation, ever hungry for connection, will continue to watch, to analyze, to empathize, and to learn from the unfolding of a love story that, while no longer fitting the fairytale mold, still carries lessons about resilience, dignity, and the complicated beauty of real human relationships.